Vivian is a champion in Paladins. She's a DPS, she has a gun, a personal shield, a drone that reveals enemies, and an ult that makes her do more damage. She had a few patches where she was extremely strong. Inara is another champion in Paladins. She's a main tank, she has a spear that shoots pebbles, an ability that makes her CC immune and take less damage, a little AoE slow, a wall, and a big AoE stun ultimate. She had a few years where she was extremely strong. One of these champions is loved by the community, and the other is extremely disliked. Let's talk about why. Vivian was strong in early 2020 during the pocket meta. Most off tanks were fairly weak, Genos with his damage amp and Corvus with his lifesteal were everywhere, and DPS reigned supreme. Vivian was strong because she did a lot of damage. That was it. How much damage? Well, she did 170 per shot with a 0.14 seconds fire rate, which is 1,214 DPS. That's a lot, right? Well, we haven't factored in her talent, Opportunity and Chaos, which gave her a 20% damage amp after firing for 2 seconds. And with her massive 70 ammo clip size, plus some loadout cards that can give her some ammo back, she has this new DPS of 1,457, which was crazy, but we haven't even gotten started yet. With her ultimate, she got an extra 200 DPS. She also built ult charge for her next ult, while she already had an ult active, so she had a very high uptime on this ult. And it wasn't just 200 DPS in total, it was 200 DPS per drone, so it's actually an extra 400 DPS. So with her ult, she had 1,857 DPS. And this character is hit scan, which means she can headshot. If you always headshot, you get a stupidly high 2,221 DPS. Now that's not practical, but it just goes to show how stupidly good this character was. To put this into context, if you're an Eevee and you blink onto a Vivian who hits all her shots and has the Opportunity and Chaos bonus, this is how fast you die.
Ow! So, this is despair.
And we're still not done talking about her. She still has her loadout cards. She had an absolutely insane 40% lifesteal. So if you hit all your shots, you would be healing anywhere from 485 HPS at the lowest to 874 HPS with all her bonuses and headshots. And then again, most of the time you'd be somewhere in between. She also had up to 30% move speed, more than current max Emble, just in her loadout. Combined with her lifesteal and her shield and her base kit, she would win 1v1s against most tanks. But what if you were a DPS? Well, Vivian had options for that too. She could run shield HP and make herself a better duelist. If the Vivian had shield up, you couldn't break the shield and kill her before you were dead yourself. It just wasn't doable with how much damage that she did. Well, what if you didn't shoot the shield? It only covers half her body. Again, Vivian has an answer. You think 25% DR on Tyra is bad? A card named Scapegoat made a percent of the damage done to Vivian when she has her shield up go to her shield. So if you shoot the Vivian for 1,000, maybe 600 of that goes to the Vivian, and the other 400 goes to her shield, which the shield could have anywhere between 1,400 and 2,250 HP, which again forced the situation where you just could not kill her before she killed you. And that's not even mentioning one of her abilities, which offered up to a 5-second reveal on enemies. There were a few answers to Vivian. Terminus didn't really care about her damage. Eevee and BK had decent matchups if you were willing to gamble on the quality of the servers, especially during this time. She didn't have the best range, so outranging her if like a Kinessa was possible. Ashe and Rom could get on top of her, Ashe with her ult and Rom with his massive HP pool, and they could survive long enough to buy time for the DPS to come in and follow up. She wasn't the most busted character in the game. There were other things that were strong too, but she was definitely on top of the meta. If you're interested in seeing Vivian in this state, there's a link in the description to a VOD with a team that has a certain support player on it, playing and drafting around Vivian. Inara has been pretty strong since basically ever. She's so strong because she doesn't die. She walks to point, she pops DR, which reduces the damage she takes by 50% and increases the healing she takes by 40% for 4 whole seconds. It's barely worth shooting her when she has DR up, and she absorbs healing like a sponge. Then after that, she doesn't have the Arya shooting her and actually doing damage, and then she puts up a wall. She just walls herself off. You can't shoot her, she can't shoot you, but her support can still heal her. Then after 5 seconds of the wall being up, it finally drops, and there's a glimmer of hope in your young, naive DPS player eyes, and then she pops DR again. Now, she can't just infinitely cycle these cooldowns and live forever. There are times when she's vulnerable, and she can be angled behind her wall and caught hurts her, but it's a Herculean effort to kill the Rock Lady if you want to take the fight to point. Now, the interesting bits about Inara come when she uses her cooldowns aggressively. I don't include her slow in her cooldowns because it's really just not super impactful. So she can use her wall to wall chokes off, to wall people inside. There's a lot of cool uses for it. You can also boot people. If you activate it under someone, they just go straight up, but if you hit them with the edge of the wall, they get knocked forwards or backwards a tiny bit. So you can end up with situations where you can boot people off high grounds or even off the map. With DR, you're basically just an unkillable tank, slowly running it down to the backline. DPS literally have to run from you because you cannot die. But you only get a short window to do this, you only get 4 seconds, and then you're kind of caught out in no man's land with only a wall. And then her ult is pretty standard for a game like this. It's a big AoE stun, it's affected by Resolve, it's very strong. So it's not even that she lived forever by just existing, she just had these insanely strong cooldowns that she could use to do basically anything. And I'm hyping these characters up a decent bit, but if you want to know who wins between old Vivian and old Inara, it was 100% old Vivian, not even close. Vivian farmed Inara. So let's bring it back to the original point here. One of these was generally hated when they were strong, and the other was well liked, despite both of these being very, very strong. Vivian was the one who was almost universally hated, and Inara was well liked. There's a reason Vivian was only strong for a few patches, and Inara was strong for years. So let's start getting into the why. What's the difference between these two? We can boil this down to counterplay, specifically how much variety in counterplay there is and the nature of that counterplay. Let's look at Vivian. So against a Vivian, there were some characters that are just going to suffer, especially some tanks. If you've ever played Makoa or Khan into old Vivian, you know it's just not fun. There's almost nothing you can do. She controls space better than you at any range. If you played most DPS characters, you had to be very careful with how you played around her. She just out-traded you. If you played support, you pretty much just had to ignore her. You could barely do anything against her. So a lot of how you played against her depended on which character you were playing. If you did want to play a certain character, they better have an okay matchup, else you're going to be having a bad time. And if you did have an okay matchup, then the gameplay itself was pretty boring. Vivian is a very simple character. Just run around, shoot, pop shields sometimes, kill things. She is a close second to the simplest character in the game in Ceres. So matchups were often very binary. If the Vivian had enough HP and shield to win, the other person could usually leave unless they got caught out by her insane DPS and 30% move speed. But if she didn't have shield or was low or something, there was nothing the Vivian could do. There's no outplay potential. To demonstrate this, here's a clip of a Vivian getting a multi-kill.
Yeah, I can't wait to take a look at these Vivian damage numbers at the end of this one because Ralkian is having a game for himself. Another double kill, and now the Inara falls into the line of fire. The Ruckus all the way in the back line to keep this fight staggered. Betty has now dropped as well, like a ton of bricks. The Amani can't even make it off the ground. A godlike performance for Ralkian as he just wreaks havoc. That's it. That's the whole set. Get him out of here. They never stood a chance.
Pretty cool. Now let's remove the audio and pay attention to what the Vivian is actually doing. She's just walking and shooting. And I mean that. This isn't an exaggeration, she's literally just walking and shooting. This character was stupidly strong and mind-numbingly boring. She was hated because she was way too strong. She was too strong for how easy she was boring to play, and she was boring and oppressive and frustrating to play against. Now let's look at Inara. Most characters lose to Inara when she has her cooldowns. Most characters lose to Inara when she has her cooldowns up, and beat her when she doesn't. And that sounds boring until you think about how these cooldowns get used. And I could probably talk about this for a long time because this is good character design, but I'm going to talk about what I know best, which is Damba. So let's say that an Inara wants to push me as a Damba, because otherwise we just wouldn't interact too often. So she can pop a DR and she can run at me, but then I know as the Damba, I can just use my cooldowns to live for 4 seconds, and I can fear her after and she'll probably die. If I don't have fear, I can at the very least stun her, and the Inara knows that, so maybe she won't push too far if I have my ult. But if we both have ults, she can push pretty deep, because her ult gives her CC immunity, so she can walk farther in, maybe use her wall. Then, when the Damba tries to punish her, she can hit the Damba with an ult and immune the fear. But the Damba also knows this, and he has Sliver, which makes him CC immune. So if the Inara does CC immune the fear, if the Damba still has Sliver up, he can immune the Inara's ult after the Inara's immuned his ult, and then the Inara still doesn't have cooldowns. So maybe the Inara tries to force Sliver with a good wall, which is a skill shot that you need to think about. And the Damba is desperately trying to not have to use Sliver, or at the very least Sliver away to a safe spot. But then he's out of the fight and the Inara successfully took space, or maybe the Damba even tries to get an ult off like in this sort of situation just to catch the Inara off guard. And that's just one character in a sort of vacuum. I could go on for each character in each map and each team comp. You end up in a matchup where each cooldown matters, each shot matters, whether each player has ult matters, and every variable around them matters. And let's compare that to the Damba Vivian matchup. If the Vivian is low and has no shield, I shoot her and she dies. If the Vivian can see me for long enough, I die. If I can run away, I run away. If I want to ult her and she has no resolve, she dies. The depth in the matchup comes from how long the Vivian can see me for. But the depth in the Damba Inara matchup comes from the situation and how well each player uses their cooldown and which cooldowns they have. Outplay potential is the reason that even when some characters are stupidly broken, they're not unfun to play against. You can always do something to win. You can always outplay the other person. Even if your matchup is hard, there's something that you can do to win. It's also the main reason for frustration against broken characters. It feels awful when there's nothing you can do, or even just when you feel like there's nothing you can do. Let's look at Vivian and Inara today in patch 4.6. Vivian has been nerfed in almost every aspect of her kit. Her damage got nerfed, her shield got nerfed, her ult got nerfed, along with every single lit up card that I talked about. She is almost unplayable right now. Everything can do her job better. And that's kind of the issue with these characters. They don't have much outplay potential. It's very common for them to be crazy strong, get nerfed, and then when they can't do that thing, they can't do it, right? And nothing the Vivian player does, even if they're the best Vivian player in the world, they can't do that thing anymore, that thing that they were played for. They can't do it, so the character just vanishes from viability. So what you do with these characters, you either want them to be playable, but only in a small niche, just so they don't vanish off the face of the earth, or you rework them in some way. Look at Vivian's abilities. Every single ability that isn't mine is just some variation on shoot better, which is insane. Inara also has, for some reason, been nerfed in almost every aspect of her kit. Her wall is kind of the same, it's got a shorter cooldown, but it's got a smaller health pool, but her DR was nerfed significantly. It was nerfed by 10%, and that's only 10%. But trust me here, or ask any tank player, it mattered a lot. Her main tool for surviving and making plays just does not let her do that anymore. She is significantly squishier, and by far the weakest main tank in the game. She's not unplayable, and it's very easy to just sit on point on her like a paperweight, so she's easy to play, but has a really high skill cap, so she's playable and ranked, but just because of how weak she is and that big nerf that she got, she's really never the best option. Evil Mojo did technically buff Inara recently. They changed the duration of her DR from 5 seconds to 5.3 seconds. So they've really been missing the parts that made this character fun to play and fun to play against. I liked playing against Inara. I wish they'd revert the nerfs and bring her back to 50% DR. And there's a few characters like this that were fun to play against, with good outplay potential, that have been nerfed over time, either directly or by the Haven change or by Evil Mojo's decision to move to cloud servers. Bomb King, Buck, Furia, Eevee, they're not doing poorly, they're all pickable, but when you look at what they were, it sucks to see that these awesome characters with great outplay potential are just a shell of their former selves. So that's the video. I tried to spend a bit more time on the production quality of this one, so hope that worked out. I do daily streams at 8 EST. I do one YouTube video a week on Saturday, and it's this sort of decent production value, talking about the game sort of thing, which I don't think anyone else is doing right now, which is pretty cool. So, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.